In most companies, you hear a lot about accountability. It's held up as a core value. But when a project doesn't go as planned, something strange happens. It's almost impossible to find the one person who is ultimately answerable. This isn't an accident. It's a paradox built into the very structure of how we work. Think about a common scenario. A team spends months on a project. They have their meetings, they complete their tasks, they send all the right updates. But when it's all said and done, the project just doesn't hit the mark. Maybe it's late or over budget, or it simply fails to do what it was supposed to do. So, a review meeting is called to figure out what went wrong. In that meeting, you'll hear leadership talk about the importance of accountability. Everyone in the room nods along, agreeing that holding people accountable is absolutely essential for things to go better next time. And yet, when the meeting ends, a clear answer about who was truly answerable for that final outcome is rarely found. Lots of people were involved, sure, but no single person is identified as the owner of the failure. This points to a fundamental puzzle inside many organizations. The key to solving this puzzle is to look at how organizations are designed in the first place. Their main strategy for dealing with complex work is to break it down into smaller, more manageable parts. And they do this by assigning very specific roles to different people or teams.
The structure typically defines a few key roles. The first one is the doer. This is pretty straightforward. It's the person or the team actually executing a specific task.
Now, separate from the doer, there's the owner. This is usually just one person who is ultimately answerable for the entire thing being completed successfully. They're the one who has to approve the final work. To help guide the work, you have the consultant. This is a subject matter expert who gets involved in a two-way discussion to provide input and advice. And finally, there are those who are designated as the informed. These are people who are kept in the loop on progress, but they receive that information one way. They aren't directly involved in the decisions. Let's apply this to a simple task, like developing a project budget. The finance team might be the doer. The project manager is the single owner, the one answerable for that final budget. The department head is consulted for their input, and the executive sponsor is kept informed. On paper, this system looks perfectly clear. But on most real-world projects, the doing isn't handled by just one person. The responsibility for different parts of the work is split up among multiple teams and individuals. And this split creates a really important difference. When you have many people responsible for doing, their effort is divided. Their focus tends to narrow to just their specific piece of the puzzle, and that sense of ownership for the whole result gets diluted. On the other hand, when one person is accountable for the outcome, their effort is focused on that final result, and the ownership is crystal clear. So the very structure that's meant to make work more efficient, dividing the labor, can actually create a gap between the activity of doing tasks and the ultimate ownership of the outcome. It's possible for everyone to be very busy, for everyone to be doing their job correctly, and yet no single person feels answerable for how it all comes together in the end. This situation usually isn't about anyone's intentions. It's not about people avoiding work. Instead, the organizational system itself creates subtle but very powerful pressures that shape how people behave within it. One of these pressures comes from environments where making a mistake carries a heavy price. This could mean high visibility for any errors, or even formal penalties that might damage a person's career. And the natural response to that kind of pressure is for individuals to avoid becoming the sole person who is answerable for a complex outcome. It just feels safer to share the responsibility so that if things go wrong, no one person has to bear all of the blame. Ambiguity creates another kind of pressure. This happens when the specific responsibilities for each role aren't well defined, or when the ultimate goal of the entire project is kind of vague or seems to keep changing. When things are confusing, it's very common for people to just assume that some other person or some other department is the one tracking the overall outcome. Everyone focuses on their own immediate task, trusting that somebody else is watching the big picture. A third pressure has to do with communication. In some organizations, bringing problems or bad news to leadership is subtly discouraged. People get the sense that raising a concern will make them look negative or like they can't handle their job. The result of this is that people who are closest to the work, the ones who see a problem starting to develop, might hesitate to report it. And that means critical information about risks and small errors never makes its way up the chain of command. This prevents leaders from fixing issues before they grow into major failures. And this really gets to the heart of the challenge. When you have many different people,
all contributing small pieces to a large, complex project, it becomes incredibly difficult to point to who exactly should be held answerable for the final result.
So, it's tempting to look at this situation and think the system is broken, but it's more accurate to say that the system is simply making a trade-off, whether it's doing so intentionally or not.
On the one hand, the system is optimized for a very specific purpose. It's designed to take highly complex work, break it down, and spread it out across many people. This allows a huge volume of tasks to be completed efficiently at the same time.
But the direct consequence of that design choice, the other side of the trade-off, is that singular ownership of the final combined result gets lost in the process. The very structure that makes the work manageable is the same one that makes ultimate answerability so hard to pin down.
In the end, the system is often working exactly as it was designed to. It is optimized to get a high volume of individual tasks done, and this optimization frequently comes at the expense of clear, final accountability for the overall outcome.